Some rivers do not simply carry water. They carry memories, regrets, and the souls of those who were never ready to leave. In a quiet village by a dark Thai river, a mother drowned without a body to bury, without a proper farewell. But death did not end her love. And it did not end her bond. This is the story of a drowned mother who came back to visit her child. Not to scare, not to haunt, but to hold on, just a little too long. Chapter 1. The River That Never Returns the Dead. No one in Ban Klong village could remember when the river had first existed. The oldest villagers only said that when they were born, the river was already there, silent, murky, winding like a living creature lying in sleep. By day, it looked harmless, its slow current reflecting the pale gray sky of the countryside. But at night, the river seemed to thicken, as if something heavy was resting beneath its surface. The villagers believed that those who died in this stretch of water would never fully cross into the next world. Mei Sa Na knew this. Everyone who lived by the river did. Yet that afternoon, she went down to the water as she had done hundreds of times before. In her hands was a basin of her son Nawin's clothes, still carrying the scent of a child's sweat and dried mud from a day of play. She sat on the familiar stone slab, its surface worn smooth by years of washing, and dipped the sleeves into the cold river. Nothing about the day felt unusual. No rain, no strong wind, only a damp heaviness clinging to her skin, like the river's breath pressing close. Mei Sa Na slipped. It happened too fast for her to cry out. The stone was slick with moss. The basin overturned. The dark water surged upward, pulling her down like an invisible hand. In the brief moment before she was dragged under, Mei Sa Na thought of Nawin, her son waiting for dinner at home. Water flooded her mouth, her nose, her lungs. Her ears rang. The world went dark. No one heard a sound. The next morning, villagers gathered along the riverbank. They found Mei Sa Na's hair ribbon tangled in the branches, the fabric soaked and heavy with mud, but her body was nowhere to be found. They searched for 3 days, diving into every bend of the river, calling her name until their voices broke. The river remained silent. People whispered among themselves, avoiding the surface of the water. The river has kept her. And in a small wooden house at the edge of the village, a 7-year-old boy sat on the front step, waiting for his mother to return, never knowing that this river had never given back what it had taken. Chapter 2. The child Who stayed behind. From the day Mei Sa Na did not return, the small wooden house at the edge of Ban Klong fell into a frightening silence. There were no longer familiar footsteps crossing the floorboards, no sound of water being poured into a pot each afternoon, no woman's voice calling her child inside when evening came. There was only Nawin, a 7-year-old boy, sitting on the front step, his back against a wooden pillar, his eyes fixed on the dirt path that led to the river. At first, people thought it was just the normal reaction of a child who had lost his mother. But as the days passed, something felt wrong. Nawin did not cry. He did not ask why his mother had not come home. He simply waited. In the mornings, when his grandmother pulled him inside to eat, he obeyed quietly. At midday, he played alone in the yard. But every evening, when the sun began to sink, he returned to the front step, always the same spot, always the same posture, as if he feared that if he moved even a little, the one returning would not find him. Once, his grandmother said softly, "Your mother isn't coming back, Nawin." The boy shook his head. His voice was small, but firm. "She will come back, she said so." No one knew when Mei Sa Na had ever said that. At night, whispers began to spread through the village. Some claimed they had seen the light in Nawin's house turn on at midnight, even though no one should have been awake. Others said that when they passed by, they heard a child's voice speaking, answered by an adult voice that sounded as though it came from the bottom of a well. Nawin's grandmother stopped sleeping soundly. Many nights, she woke with a sudden chill crawling along her spine, as if someone had been standing behind her for a very long time. Each time she turned to look at Nawin, she saw him curled beneath his blanket, his lips moving slightly, as though he were speaking to someone who was not there. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. Nawin turned toward her. His eyes were darker, deeper than before. "My mother." A gust of wind slipped into the house. making the wooden door creak. The smell of river mud drifted through the air, even though the doors and windows were shut. That night, the grandmother understood something terrifying. Nawin was not the only one waiting for his mother to return. Perhaps someone else was already finding her way back to him. Chapter 3. Wet footprints in the house. The seventh night after May Sa Na disappeared, Ban Klong was wrapped in an unnatural silence. No insects chirped, no dogs barked, even the wind seemed to have stopped. The quiet felt heavy, as if the entire village were holding its breath, waiting for something to step out of the darkness. Nawin's grandmother woke just before dawn, shivering from the cold. It was not the chill of rain or river wind, but a deeper cold, one that seeped beneath the skin and crawled slowly up her spine, making her heart miss a beat. She sat up, pulled the blanket closer, and then noticed a familiar smell. River mud, stagnant water. The door was still shut. No one had entered. When her feet touched the wooden floor, they met dampness. She bent down, and her breath caught in her throat. There were wet footprints on the floor. They were small and narrow, each toe clearly marked, the footprints of a woman. Water dripped from them, leaving dark stains that spread slowly across the wood. The footprints began at the front door and led inward, step by step, unhurried, perfectly straight, as if the one who made them knew this house intimately. Her hands trembling, the grandmother followed the trail. It ended beside Nawin's bed. The boy was still asleep, his face strangely peaceful. His blanket was soaked through, as though it had just been lifted from the river. His hair clung to his forehead, cold to the touch, yet he had no fever. His breathing was slow and steady, and from his lips escaped a faint murmur. "Mom, you're back?" The grandmother staggered backward, her mouth opening but no scream coming out. In that moment, she felt it clearly. Someone was standing behind her, very close. A breath of cold brushed the back of her neck, carrying the unmistakable scent of river water. When she turned around, there was no one there. By morning, even after the sun had risen high, the floor had not dried. The footprints faded, but the water stains remained. No matter how hard she scrubbed, the wood stayed darker in those places, as if the water had soaked deep into the grain itself. Villagers came to look. No one spoke. No one dared to say aloud what they were thinking. In Ban Klong, everyone knew one thing. When the dead leave wet footprints inside a house, they have not come to say goodbye. And from that night on, no one dared let Nawin sleep alone again. But the most terrifying part was this. Even with someone beside him, every morning his blanket was still wet. Chapter 4. The Lullaby by the Ear. After the night the wet footprints appeared, Nawin's grandmother no longer dared to turn off the lamp when she slept. A small oil lamp was placed beside the bed, its yellow light trembling whenever a draft slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls. But the light could not drive away the cold. The cold remained, quiet and persistent, as if it did not come from the air, but from something present inside the house. Nawin began to sleep very deeply. So deeply that no matter how much his grandmother shook him, he only frowned slightly, his lips moving as if forming incomplete words. Every night, around midnight, he would turn onto his side, face the wall, and fall into a familiar stillness. And it was in that stillness that the lullaby began. It did not sound as if it came from far away. It felt close, right beside his cheek, slipping through his hair, touching his skin with sound that was cold and heavy. It was the same lullaby May Sa Na had sung for years. Every word, every rhythm unchanged, but the voice was no longer warm. It was lower, slower, and every final note seemed to be pulled down by water, thick and muffled. Nawin was not afraid. In his dream, he saw his mother sitting beside the bed. Her hair hung loose, dripping steadily onto the floor. Her hand rested on his chest, so cold it made his heart tighten, yet the familiarity of that touch made him unwilling to move away. "Sleep well, my child. Mother is here." One night, the grandmother woke suddenly to the sound of singing. Very soft, very close. Her body froze. There was no radio in the house. No one else was awake. The words were unclear, but the melody was unmistakable. It was the lullaby May Sa Na used to sing whenever Nawin was sick. The grandmother turned her head toward the boy. Nawin was asleep, a faint smile on his lips. Beside the bed, a large section of the mat was wet, water seeping down onto the wooden floor, dripping slowly. The flickering lamp cast light onto a dark shape next to the bed, a shape roughly human, but without a clear face. The grandmother bit her lip and dared not look for long. The next morning, her throat was raw from a night of holding her breath. When she asked Nawin about it, he answered softly, as if stating something obvious. "Mom comes to sing me to sleep every night. She says she's cold." Outside, the river flowed quietly. And from that night on, Nawin's sleep no longer belonged entirely to the world of the living. Chapter 5. The villagers begin to die. The first death did not immediately make anyone think of Mesa Na. It was only the old dog belonging to the village headman, a dog that had lived in Ban Klong for more than 10 years. Familiar with every corner and every riverside step. That morning, it was found dead inside a large water jar behind the house. Its muzzle submerged beneath the surface. Its body curled inward as though it had struggled for a long time before finally giving up. The jar was not deep. The dog knew how to swim. People said it must have been an accident, but when the body was pulled out, someone noticed that its claws were broken, as if it had been frantically scraping against the sides of the jar in desperation. 2 days later, a man died. He was a drunk, often sleeping by the river whenever he was too intoxicated to walk home. No one was surprised when they heard he had slipped and fallen into the water. But when his body was recovered, his face was frozen in terror. His mouth wide open, his eyes bulging. Both of his hands were bruised dark purple, his fingernails dug deep into his own throat, as if he had tried to tear the water out of his lungs. Rumors spread faster than the river itself. People whispered that in recent nights, the river had been rising and receding against the natural tide, leaving strange mud stains along the banks. Some claimed they had seen the silhouette of a woman standing in the middle of the river, her long hair covering her face, her body neither fully submerged nor floating. Nawin's grandmother heard these stories and felt her heart tighten. With every death, Nawin grew quieter. His skin became unnaturally cold. Especially at night, he often woke suddenly, staring at the door, as if listening to someone calling him. "My mother doesn't want them to die," he said once, very softly. "She just needs someone to stay with her." Those words made the grandmother tremble. At last, the village monk spoke during a prayer gathering. He paused for a long moment, gazing toward the river, then said slowly, "Spirits who die by drowning are powerful. If they are not released, they will seek a replacement." No one asked what replacement meant. Everyone already knew. That night, as the moon rose, the river at Ban Klong turned a deep, unnatural black. The wind blew against the current, and in a small wooden house at the edge of the village, a 7-year-old child was becoming the anchor that bound a dead soul to the living world. Chapter 6. The mother returns in full form. That afternoon, the sky over Ban Klong hung unnaturally low. Gray clouds pressed down on the rooftops, making the air feel suffocating, as if a storm were about to break, yet not a single drop of rain fell. The river flowed more slowly than usual, its surface eerily smooth, reflecting every tree along the bank, but the water had darkened, as if mud from the depths had risen to mix with it. Nawin stood alone in the yard for a long time. His grandmother called to him several times, but he did not turn around. His gaze was fixed on the palm tree near the riverbank, the very place where Mei Sa Na used to wait whenever he came home late from playing. He began to walk toward it, slowly, without hesitation, as though he already knew exactly what he was going to see. And then, she appeared. Mei Sa Na stood beneath the tree's shadow, thin and motionless. Her dress was soaked through, clinging tightly to her skin. Its color darkened as if it had been steeped in mud for days. Her hair hung down over her face, each strand dripping steadily onto the dry ground, forming spreading patches of dampness. She did not come from anywhere. She had already been there, as if the earth itself had released her. When she lifted her head, Nawin saw his mother's face. Her skin was ashen, her lips pale, her eyes sunken, their gaze clouded as though covered by a thin film of water. And yet, she was unmistakably his mother, every familiar feature, every small line at the corners of her eyes, The only difference was that there was no warmth left in her body. "I'm back," she said. Her voice sounded close, yet it did not travel through the air. It echoed directly inside his head, cold and heavy. Water dripped from her chin to her neck, then down her arms, falling to the ground in steady drops. Inside the house, the grandmother stood frozen, witnessing everything through the doorway. She wanted to scream, to rush out and pull Nawin back, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. In that moment, she knew this was no longer a hidden presence. May Sa Na took one step toward her son. The ground beneath her feet darkened with moisture. Even though the earth was dry, no clear footprints formed, only spreading wetness following each step. She reached out her hand, her long fingers trembling slightly, as if struggling against an endless cold. "I'm so cold," she whispered. "Come closer to me." Nawin took a step forward. And at that exact moment, the grandmother finally screamed, a cry that tore through the still afternoon. But May Sa Na did not turn. Her eyes remained locked on her son, as if the entire world of the dead contained only him. Chapter 7. The Hidden Truth. Night fell quickly after May Sa Na revealed herself. The air inside the house grew heavy, as if the wooden walls had absorbed the damp breath of the river. The grandmother sat before the makeshift altar, her trembling hands pressed together. The incense sticks extinguished before they could fully burn, leaving behind a sharp, cold scent that clung to the room. Nawin sat quietly in the corner. He did not cry. He did not ask why everyone was panicking. His gaze drifted, unfocused, as if he could still see his mother standing somewhere outside the house. When the village monk was finally summoned, the silence broke. He studied the house for a long time, his eyes lingering on the darkened floorboards, the damp patch beside the bed, and finally on the grandmother's bowed head. Then he sighed deeply. "Not every spirit who drowns can return like this," he said slowly. "If she is still here, it means she is being held back." The grandmother collapsed into tears. Between choking sobs, she confessed the truth she had kept buried. On the day May Sa Na died, the family had no money. She had not performed the proper rites for a drowned spirit, only a rushed, symbolic funeral. She had told herself it was enough. After all, the dead no longer needed anything. What she had not told anyone was that she had kept the insurance money in May Sa Na's name, the money that should have been used to perform the rituals meant to release a drowned soul. The monk closed his eyes. "Spirits who drown are weakest at first," he said. "If no one guides them, they cling to the only thing that still binds them to this world." His gaze shifted to Nawin. The grandmother fell to the floor. In that moment, she understood the most horrifying truth of all. Her selfishness had turned a mother's love into chains. That night, the wind from the river grew stronger. Water seeped beneath the door, slowly spreading across the floorboards. Nawin stood up and walked outside, his voice small but clear. "Mother says she can't leave. Someone hasn't let her go." Outside, the river's surface rippled in slow, widening circles, as if something beneath the water was listening. And from that moment on, everyone knew. To save the child, they would first have to face the sins of the living. Chapter 8. The child begins to change. Nawin's change did not happen suddenly. It came little by little, quietly, like ink spreading through water, so slowly that by the time anyone noticed, it was already impossible to wash away. During the day, the boy still ate his meals and listened obediently when adults spoke to him. But his eyes were different. The curiosity and restlessness of a 7-year-old were gone. In their place was a depth that felt too still, as though he had seen things children were never meant to see. When someone called his name, he often turned his head a moment too late, as if he were returning from somewhere far away. The first thing that truly terrified his grandmother was the cold. Even under the harsh midday sun, Nawin's skin felt cold, like it had just been pulled from water. His hands were always damp, not with sweat, but with a thin, chilling moisture that carried a faint smell of river mud. At night, no matter how many blankets were piled on him, they quickly became wet, as if the cold inside his body were seeping outward. Nawin began to go to the river more often. No one led him there. He seemed to know the way instinctively, and he always chose the same spot. At the same time, villagers sometimes saw him sitting at the edge of the river at dusk, his legs dangling above the dark water, his lips moving as if he were speaking to someone. When asked who he was talking to, he would only smile faintly. "My mother likes listening to my stories," he said. "She can't hear very well down there." From that day on, Nawin was no longer afraid of water. He could stand for a long time by the river without blinking, staring into the black surface as though it were a familiar face. Once, his grandmother cried out in horror when she saw him step into the river until the water reached his knees. The water did not knock him over. It did not pull him under. It wrapped around him slowly and gently, like the embrace of a mother. At night, Nawin dreamed often, but they were not nightmares. These dreams drew him into a deep sleep, so deep that no one could wake him. As he slept, he sometimes whispered, "Mother," his voice soft and steady, as though answering someone who was murmuring close by. When the monk visited again, he only needed one look at the child before quietly turning away. His voice dropped when he spoke to the grandmother. "The spirit has reached him too deeply," he said. "If the bond is not cut soon, the boy will no longer belong to this world." Outside, the river continued to flow. And with every breath Nawin took, the chill of the dead was slowly replacing the warmth of the living. Chapter 9. The shaman comes to the village. The shaman arrived in Ban Klong on a morning when the fog was so thick the far end of the village could not be seen. He was an outsider, not belonging to any family there. Yet his name had been spoken for years, a man known for dealing with spirits who died wrongly, died with resentment, died by drowning. He carried very little with him, only an old cloth bag, several talismans yellowed with age, and a string of wooden prayer beads worn smooth by time. As soon as he stepped off the boat, he stopped and stared at the river for a long moment before slowly shaking his head. "This place holds on to people," he said. "It does not let go easily." When he entered Nawin's house, the shaman did not begin any ritual at once. He sat down on the wooden floor and placed his palm against it, closing his eyes. After a while, he pulled his hand back. His palm was wet and cold. "The mother's spirit is here," he said firmly. "And she is not alone." The grandmother's face drained of color. The shaman beckoned Nawin to come closer. The boy walked over obediently, but each step left a faint damp mark on the floor. When the shaman placed his hand on the child's forehead, his body tensed slightly. "So cold," he murmured. "Cold like someone who has just come out of the water." He looked straight at the grandmother. "If this continues," he said, his voice grave, "before the night of the full moon, the child will die, not by drowning, but by being pulled to the other side." The words fell into the house like a blade. The shaman explained that spirits who die by drowning cannot remain long in the world of the living. To stay, they must cling to another life force, and there was no bond stronger than that between a mother and her child. "The mother is not evil," he said quietly, "but she does not know she is killing him." That afternoon, the shaman went to the riverbank. He planted talismans into the ground and traced a circle with incense ash. When he called May Sa Na's name, the river trembled slightly, ripples spreading across the surface even though the wind was completely still. Within the murky water, a faint human shape appeared, then vanished. The shaman turned back, his expression heavy. "We have only one night," he said. "Either we sever the bond, or we bury another life." The moon began to rise behind the trees along the riverbank, and Ban Klong stepped into the longest night it had ever known. Chapter 10. The Night of Summoning. The summoning ritual was prepared as the moon rose above the line of trees by the riverbank. The moonlight was not bright, but dull and hazy, as though veiled by a thin layer of mist. The surface of the Ban Klong River lay unnaturally still, no ripples, no reflection of the moon, only a vast, dark mass like the mouth of a giant well. The shaman set up the altar at the water's edge. Incense ash was scattered into a wide circle, talismans planted into the ground in 4 directions. At the center of the circle, Nawin sat silently, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze empty. He did not cry, he did not ask questions. He knew his mother would come tonight, not in dreams, but for real. When the chanting began, A wind rose from the river. It was not strong, but it was cold, carrying the stench of mud and rotting weeds. The water near the shore started to tremble, as if something beneath the surface were slowly stirring. The shaman called May Sa Na's name. At first, nothing happened, but on the third call, his voice dropped lower. Each syllable stretched long and heavy, and the river began to boil. Not with heat, but with black bubbles surging upward, bursting one after another and releasing a thick, foul smell. Then a face emerged from the water. It was May Sa Na's face, ashen, bloated, her hair tangled around her neck and shoulders like river weeds. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, fixed directly on Nawin. Her mouth gaped, water and mud pouring in and spilling back out with each breath that no longer existed. "Son." The voice did not travel through the air. It struck directly into the minds of everyone standing there. Nawin sprang to his feet. He stepped toward the river. Even as the shaman shouted for him to stop, each step left behind a long trail of water, connecting the shore to the river itself, as though a path between the two worlds had already been drawn. The grandmother collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "Please, forgive us, I was wrong." The face beneath the water twitched. Its expression held no anger, no malice, only hunger, cold, and the terror of being left alone. A pale hand rose from the river, clutching the muddy bank. Fingernails snapped and broke, streaks of thin blood dissolving into the water. The shaman shouted, "You must not pull him with you. If you do, your soul will be drowned forever." The river convulsed violently. The wind blew out every oil lamp. In that instant of total darkness, the cry of a mother rang out, not the scream of a demon, but the cry of a woman who had died without ever finding peace. And when the moonlight returned, the face beneath the water had moved much closer to the shore. Chapter 11. The Mother's Choice. The river pulsed in slow, heavy waves, like a massive chest struggling to breathe. May Sa Na's face had come very close to the shore. Water spilled over the muddy bank, soaking Nawin's feet. The cold from the river crept up his legs, seeped into his bones, but he did not step back. He stood still, his eyes locked on his mother. She reached out her hand. It was pale, waterlogged, the skin wrinkled from long immersion. Her fingers trembled from the cold. When her hand touched her son's, a wave of chill rushed through him, making his body shudder. But Nawin did not pull away. He tightened his grip, as if afraid that if he let go, his mother would dissolve into the water. "I'm here." May Sa Na's voice echoed inside his head, fractured and exhausted. "I don't want to be alone anymore." At that moment, the river rose a little higher. Water reached Nawin's calves. The incense ash circle broke apart, its protection thinning. The shaman shouted, his voice hoarse with fear. "If you pull him down, you will never be reborn. And this child will die in the water just as you did." May Sa Na froze. For the first time, something changed in her eyes. The cloudy film within them cleared, revealing a fragile spark of awareness, like a dying flame trembling in the rain. She looked down at the small hand gripping hers, warm, shaking slightly, but alive. Memories surged through the drowned mother's mind, afternoons washing clothes by the river, nights singing her child to sleep, countless sleepless hours when Nawin burned with fever in her arms. "If I let go, will you forget me?" Her voice broke, no longer terrifying, only desperate. Nawin shook his head, tears falling onto her hand. "Warm. I won't forget you. But you had to go." The words cut like a slow blade, severing the last bond. May Sa Na began to cry. Her tears mixed with the river, indistinguishable from the water itself. She squeezed his hand one final time, then let go. The moment their hands separated, the river surged backward, dragging her body away from the shore. "You must live?" Her voice faded as it sank. "For both of us." The river grew still. Nawin collapsed onto the bank, his entire body trembling. The cold vanished from his hands. Only a faint damp mark remained, like a trace of water's kiss, slowly drying beneath the moonlight. Chapter 12. The Sacrifice. When May Sa Na released her son's hand, the surface of the Ban Klong River suddenly lowered, as if exhaling after holding its breath for far too long. The water receded slowly, without crashing waves, leaving behind muddy stains along the bank and a lingering stench of decay in the air. The incense ash was washed away, the protective circle broken, but no one cared anymore. May Sa Na did not disappear at once. Her body remained there, half submerged in the dark water. Moonlight revealed her pale face and eyes that no longer clung to the living world. She looked at Nawin one last time, for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every detail of the sun she had held onto longer than she should have. This time, she did not call out. She slowly turned her body toward the heart of the river. Her hair spread out, floating on the surface like river weeds. One hand rested on her chest, where her heart had stopped beating days ago. It was a simple, human gesture, so unmistakably maternal that the grandmother let out a broken sob. "I'm sorry." The words dissolved into wind and water. May Sa Na took another step. The water rose to her shoulders, then to her neck. Her body sank deeper, slowly, gently, not dragged, not forced, but by her own choice. There was no struggle, no panic, only the exhaustion of a spirit that had lingered too long in a place that was never meant for her. When the water reached her chin, she paused for a final, fleeting moment. Her pale lips moved slightly, as if humming a lullaby without sound. Then the river closed over her mouth and nose, covering the familiar face completely. She disappeared beneath the surface. The river sealed itself above her, flat and merciless, as though nothing had ever been there. No bubbles rose, no ripples spread, only moonlight resting on the dark water. A faint breeze passed along the riverbank. The chill surrounding Nawin faded, as if something had finally left his body. He collapsed to the ground, shaking, tears falling in silence. Inside him was an emptiness, deep and aching, but the fear was gone, replaced by a sorrow too heavy to name. The shaman bowed his head low. She chose not to take anyone with her. From that night on, Ban Klong heard no more voices calling from the river. But beneath the black water, a soul had accepted eternal drowning to keep her child among the living. Chapter 13. The child WHO survived. Nawin woke the next morning while mist still blanketed the river. He lay on the familiar mat inside the house, his head throbbing dully, his throat dry and raw as if he had cried for a very long time. Pale morning light filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, making the room feel unfamiliar, as though he had just returned from a distant place. He could not clearly remember what had happened during the night. Only scattered fragments drifted through his mind, the sound of water, broken moonlight, and the sensation of biting cold slowly fading, leaving behind a hollow space in his chest. When his grandmother entered, her eyes red from sleeplessness, Nawin looked at her for a long moment before asking in a hoarse voice, "She's gone, isn't she?" The grandmother froze. Then she nodded, very gently. "Yes, she's gone." Nawin did not cry. He sat up and looked down at his hands. They were no longer damp or cold. Warmth returned beneath the morning sun. But on his left wrist, just above the pulse, there remained a faint blue-gray mark, like the impression of fingers that refused to fade. In the days that followed, Nawin survived, quite literally. He began eating again, speaking more, but he was no longer the carefree child he once was. He feared silence. When the house grew too quiet, he would turn toward the door, as if waiting for a familiar voice to speak. But nothing ever came, only wind and the scent of old wood. Strangely, after that night, Nawin no longer dreamed. His sleep was deep and empty, without images or sound. The shaman said this was a good sign. The bond had been released. But he added quietly, "Children who touch the boundary between life and death never truly forget what it feels like." One afternoon, Nawin went alone to the riverbank. The water flowed gently, no longer the terrifying black it had once been. He stood there for a long time, then bowed his head and whispered, "I lived, Mother." There was no answer. But as he turned to leave, Nawin felt the water behind him ripple very slightly, like a soft nod. He walked back toward home, carrying a life that had been paid for with death, and a memory that would follow him forever. Chapter 14. The river changes color. After the night May Sa Na sank beneath the water, Ban Klong slowly returned to its old rhythm. The villagers stopped whispering when they passed the riverbank. Children once again played near the water during the day. Small wooden boats were set afloat as if no one had ever died unjustly in that stretch of river. But the river itself was different. No one said it out loud, yet everyone noticed that the water had changed color. It was no longer as murky as before, but not clear either. It carried a strange, pale gray hue, as though something had settled deep below, leaving behind a thin layer of sorrow across the surface. No one drowned in Ban Klong anymore. Even when someone slipped, even when a boat overturned during heavy rain, they were always pulled out in time. The villagers began to believe that the river had been calmed. The monk said the mother's spirit had paid the price, and the water had taken what it needed. Yet on nights when the moon was dim, some people still saw something unsettling. They said that if one stood quietly by the river for a long time and stared into the still water, one could see a woman standing far below the surface. She did not rise. She did not sink. She simply stood there, her long hair drifting gently with the current, her face turned toward the village. She did not call out. She did not cry. She did not raise her hand. Some said it was Mei Sa Na. Others insisted it was only an illusion of moonlight and water. But strangely, whenever that figure appeared, the river became calmer, gentler, as though someone were guarding it from within. Na Wen knew. He never told anyone, but every time he passed the river at dusk, he would lower his head slightly, as if greeting an old acquaintance. He felt no cold, heard no lullaby, only a faint awareness, as though someone were watching him from very far away. Sometimes, his grandmother stood at the doorway, gazing at the river that had changed color, her heart heavy. She understood that some sins could never be erased, only carried forward, and some spirits no longer needed to be called by name, because they had chosen to remain in their own way. The Ban Klong River continued to flow. But from that day on, no one dared say that water was only water. Because beneath that peaceful surface, a mother was still standing quietly, watching over the child she could never hold again. Chapter 15. The mother still comes to visit. Many years passed after the river changed its color. Na Wen grew up and left Ban Klong to study and work in a distant town. He became a quiet man, reserved, carrying a calmness that felt unlike that of ordinary people. Those who knew him well noticed that Na Wen had a habit of listening for a long time, as if he were always afraid of missing an important sound in the air. He never swam in the river. Not because he feared the water, but because he did not want to cross too close to a boundary he had once touched. Every year, during the festival season, Na Wen returned to the village. He brought flowers, incense, and a bowl of plain white rice, placing them by the Ban Klong River. There was no grave, no stone marker, only the quiet surface of the water reflecting a gray sky. "Mother, I'm home." He said it softly, just loud enough for himself to hear. The elders in the village said that on nights like these, if one watched from afar, the water around where Na Wen stood appeared slightly brighter, as though moonlight gathered there even when clouds covered the sky. No one dared come close enough to confirm it. On the final night before Na Wen left the village that year, he slept in the old house. The house had been repaired. The floorboards were no longer damp. The smell of river mud was gone. But deep into the night, in the silence between two breaths, he suddenly woke. There was the sound of water dripping. Very faint. Not from the roof, not from the yard. The sound was familiar enough to make his heart tighten. In the darkness, Na Wen felt a gentle chill brush his cheek, not enough to frighten him, only enough to remind him. And then he heard a lullaby. No clear words, no longer heavy or muffled like before, just a soft melody, like wind gliding over the river's surface. Na Wen did not open his eyes. He lay still, letting the sound pass over him like a memory allowed to return for a brief moment. The next morning, there were no wet footprints on the wooden floor, no water, only a lingering coolness beside the bed, remaining until the sun climbed high enough to dissolve it. Na Wen stood at the doorway and looked toward the river one last time. The water was calm, gentle, no figure, no voice, no calling, yet he knew that some farewells never truly end. The mother would not pull her child with her. She would not appear. She would not ask for anything. She only came to visit. Quietly. From beneath the water. The way a mother who never stopped loving her child. even though she had drowned long, long ago. They say the river is calm now. No more deaths. No more voices calling from the water. But if you ever pass by a river at night and feel a sudden chill, or hear a lullaby with no singer in sight, do not turn around too quickly. Because some mothers never truly leave. They only visit from beneath the water.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.